Perfect.
Hey, it's Mike.
It's Todd.
And it's Evan, and welcome upstairs to another episode of the Third Floor Podcast. This week's episode is episode 15, and joining us this week is a special guest. He is a career advisor from the Columbus College of Art and Design, and he hosts a podcast called First You Hustle. It is my great pleasure to welcome Jordan Bell to the program. Jordan, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. I believe, Michael, you have a mystery question
We
for
have a
him?
very important first question. It's going to set the tone for the entire podcast.
We can't do a single thing until this question gets answered.
Jordan?
Yeah.
Do you enjoy pineapple on your pizza?
No.
No.
It's an emphatic no.
Good man.
Nice
Good
to
man.
meet you.
We're all in agreement here. This is going to go swell.
We just had to get that out of the way.
Yeah.
It's a very short podcast. It's pro pineapple.
Wrap it up.
If you would have
please.
said yes, we might have had to.
We would have kicked you out. Before we get started and go into it, my family, everyone loves pineapple on their pizza, and so now I'm convinced that I'm adopted. But anyway, besides the point, so Jordan, you host a podcast called First You Hustle. How did you get started, on this?
On First You Hustle, so I'm a career advisor at CCAD, and art students have a lot of, they're in class most of the time, because when they're not in class, they're in studio.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually have more kind of hours in the classroom than a traditional student does. So they never have time to see me. And I'm always getting a lot of questions over email or answering the same questions. So I figured, what's a way that I could give students content without them needing to come see me because they don't have the time to see me. So we thought videos or the podcast would be a good way to do it. And podcast is just a lot easier to put together. So we started doing the podcast. We do one episode every 2 weeks for when the semester's in session. Then we kind of take a break during the summer.
So people can kind of listen to the podcast, maybe get some career advice, as they're doing their homework or something.
Yeah, if they're in studio doing their homework, working out, that's the nice thing about podcasts. You can kind of listen to them anywhere.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I get student emails at strange hours in the night, so I know that when they're on, I'm not available. So
Right.
hopefully they're listening on their own time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where did the name? I have to ask. Where the First You Hustle name? Where did that come from?
Well, one of the nice things about doing a podcast at a art school is that there's a lot of good creative minds and a good marketing team there. So CCAD's marketing department actually came up with First You Hustle. They came up with a few names. We kind of brainstormed some kind of catchphrases and words that had to do with careers. And hustle is a word associated with creative careers because everyone has their side hustle,
Right.
kind of something that they do in addition to their job. So.
Yeah.
We thought that was a good kind of play on that, and also, your career search is a full-time job, it takes a lot of work, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of hustle involved.
When did you guys start the podcast?
It's been going on since fall 2017.
Okay, so
Yeah.
a year and a half.
Yeah.
Almost. Okay.
We're in our second academic year. Yeah, this is our fourth semester doing it.
Now,
That's
do you
awesome.
co-host it with anybody else, or is it just you?
So it's just me hosting, but I always try to have other voices on the podcast. So
Okay.
we'll have alumni guests or employers. We've had students on there. Always trying to get other perspectives on there, using someone else's expertise to kind of share something.
That's
Yeah, it would be kind of hard to talk by yourself on a podcast for however long you do it. I don't know if you've ever listened to Colin Cowherd on ESPN Radio, but he has his own 3-hour radio show, and he's the only one. I'm how do you talk by yourself for 3 hours?
Yeah,
Just-
it's tough.
It's not easy to do.
You want to break up the monotony of one voice talking.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Bill Burr's the same way. Me and Mike both listen to Bill Burr's, what's it called, Monday
Morning podcast.
morning podcast. And Bill he's sitting in a room and he's just yelling at a microphone, typically for the
Rambling
first.
on.
Yeah.
And just random sports, things going on with his comedy career. And it's a challenge. But, well, that's pretty cool. That's a good, I feel like that's a good intro for anybody that listens to this. Hopefully you'll go check out First You Hustle. We'll talk more about where you can find that show. It's on a couple radio stations, right?
Yeah, it's on the Columbus Community Station, which is on 92.1 or 92.7 and 98.3.
That's
Nice.
awesome.
So, I don't know a lot about you, because this is my first time meeting you, obviously, but just looking at the run of show, I'm hearing we're going to chat about your music hobby, I guess, so you must be a pretty big music fan. So what genres, right now, are you into?
It's funny you ask me that now because on the way up I noticed like when I was listening to music it's getting a little harder and edgier for me now. So I kind of listen to a lot of things. I go through phases. So if you asked me like a few weeks ago, it was like a very like mellow like soul phase that I was in.
Nice.
Now I'm coming back around to like blues and grunge and I was listening to like Gary Clark Jr. on the way up. So like kind of getting the anger up.
I like Gary Clark Jr.
Yeah.
Good artist. Yeah.
So I go through phases, but I'll listen to anything. I mean, I like anything that's really good, really well done.
Okay.
And when I play music, I usually play like blues and rock and stuff.
That's what I was gonna ask. So I'm a musician as well. So talk to us a little bit about what your music history is like. What instruments do you play? You know, do you play live shows? Can we come watch you live?
Yeah,
That kind of thing.
Yeah, I've played a couple shows since coming to Columbus. Nothing scheduled in the near future, but hopefully this spring we'll get back out there. I play with some guys down in Grove City. We do covers, just kind of like classic rock covers.
Cool.
So it's fun when you're on stage playing. It doesn't really matter what you're playing. It's always fun just to be doing that.
Yeah.
So I like it, and that's mostly like like I said, like covers of classic rock. But I've been in bands where we do more blues or we do jam band stuff. When I was in high school, I was in more of like a punk rock kind of like trying to be like Blink-182
I'm
type
trying to do the
band.
same thing.
Nice.
Yeah, it was not.
So do you play drums, guitar, bass?
I'm a guitar player. I recently switched over to bass, and
Okay.
I wish I had done that like 20 years ago because
Big fan.
I'm really loving bass. Yeah,
Yeah.
bass is a lot of fun when you know like the theory behind it and how to play it. Because I think everyone shies away from bass because like, oh, you're just playing one note at a time. But like when
there's so much more.
Yeah, and when you get into that, it's like, oh, this is really fun to explore. So
Yeah.
I've kind of moved over to bass, and I play drums a little bit.
Okay.
Just kind of when you play with bands, you kind of like osmosis pick up other instruments. So I can carry a beat on drums, but I'm no drummer. So.
Okay. Cool. That's
Favorite
awesome.
classic rock band?
Ooh, classic rock band.
Did you say classic rock covers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've never really thought about that before, and now it's got me
Or
thinking.
one
about,
of your favorites, I guess.
Well, it got me thinking about. I remember I got into this epic argument with a coworker once, like a fun argument, but it was like, what is like America's like Beatles? Like there's no like American band that like you think of like English rock bands. You think like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, but like, what is that? American band and.
I wouldn't call them. They're not a rock and roll band per se, but I think from a standpoint of just like taking the media by storm. Maybe the Jackson 5, because when the Jackson 5 first came out, I mean, there was a big thing to have these 5 brothers and the youngest one being a 10-year-old Michael singing lead. Like, that was pretty big when you had the Motown thing going on. I've always thought the most accomplished American rock band of all time would probably have to be the Eagles.
Yeah.
Just when you look from their hits they've had on the charts and just their album sales.
Absolutely.
They're right up there at the top.
Yeah.
So-
I remember in this argument, Eagles were mentioned, and there were a lot of bands that we floated, and like then we'd always like have some kind of rebuttal. It's just tough to. But yeah, we play a couple Eagles songs, and I really like Funkadelic. We don't play much of that in this band, but like I really like that kind of funk, kind of rock mixture.
Throw like some saxophone or harmonica
Oh yeah,
as well. Absolutely.
yeah. That's the
You
one
have
thing
to.
missing in our band is the saxophone. That'd be.
I know a couple people.
If I knew to play saxophone, I would volunteer myself.
Yeah,
But
it's nothing
unfortunately,
better.
I don't.
Nothing better than like a 5-minute
Tasty.
sax solo. Just let it
no.
go,
Did you have anything you wanted to add, Michael?
No, we did talk a little bit before the podcast that you have not always lived in Columbus. You lived in Maine.
Yes.
How long were you there for?
Well, I grew up in Maine.
Okay.
And then I went to college in Ohio, and then I was recently back in Maine for a few years, and then back to Columbus 2 years ago.
So did CCAD bring you to Columbus?
Yeah, my wife and I, we were in Maine, and she grew up in Columbus, and we both knew we wanted to come back to Columbus, and we both actually happened to find jobs around the same time. So I moved first, and then she moved like a month later.
Oh, really? So it worked out pretty well.
It worked out very well, yeah.
That's awesome. So we were talking. I caught bits of this before. We were talking about pancake shops. I was printing off the run of shows, so I didn't quite. There's a.
You spent some time in Pittsburgh, and I've been to Pittsburgh too. We were both talking about Pamela's, which is an incredibly famous pancake place that they have. They do these little thin, crisp. They're like crepes, but giant pancakes. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Pamela's is a must stop if you're in Pittsburgh. Because I lived in Pittsburgh for a few years.
You have to
after
time it right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those places that gets a line, so you
Okay.
gotta go at the right time. But
Is it one of those places that like closes at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
Last time I went there was cash only as
Oh,
well.
wow.
yeah.
I
A
don't
lot
think
of
they're
places in
accept-
Pittsburgh are cash only.
Right.
Surprisingly,
That's
so yeah.
Old fashioned.
Well, that's pretty cool. So let's jump into your podcasting. So I feel like podcasting in today's world is just kind of, anybody can do it, right? And if you have a microphone and you have a computer and you have connection to the internet, you can pretty much do a podcast. Now, does that mean it's the right way to do a podcast? No, not necessarily. And like we were talking before, the show, and if you guys go back and listen to our first 9 episodes, you'll definitely hear where we've had some technical issues. We don't have a professional setup here by any means
Yet.
yet.
We're getting there.
That's the real reason we brought Jordan. No, I'm just kidding. So Jordan has you have a huge history with broadcasting, radio, television shows, and the work that goes into making those productions happen. So I guess my first question is if you could, knowing what you know now, how would you say for people that want to start a podcast or start a broadcast, what would you say is like the top 3 or 4 things that you probably need to consider before you jump into doing a podcast or a broadcast in general?
That's a good question. Podcasting is a hobby, so if you look at it from a hobby and you compare it to other hobbies, like on one hand it could seem really expensive, to do it right, to have like a professional grade studio that sounds really good, but it doesn't need to cost that much. And if you kind of invest in it like you do any other hobby, like if you were going to go golfing, it's expensive to get clubs and to go pay fees and stuff. So if you invest a little bit over time, like you'll get there. So this is a great way to start. Just grab a microphone, start recording, start building an audience, start kind of workshopping your topic and working out all those kinks. If you spend a lot of money on a lot of expensive equipment and then you finally get in the studio and you find you have no concept or you can't build an audience or you get sick of it, then it's good to, it's kind of like with like redoing a house. When I owned a house, it's like you buy the tool you need when you need it. You don't go, as much as I wanted to like go to Lowe's and just like stock up on every tool,
Oh my gosh.
you just go buy what you need when you need it. So
Yeah.
I think the first thing is like a good microphone. And microphones these days, a lot of them come with a USB connection. You can go straight into a computer. So if you already have a computer, then just get a good microphone.
Yeah.
And then if you're looking to build from there, it's, there's 4 of us, there's 1 microphone, maybe get a second microphone. Then just kind of add from there. We're in a good space right here. And then you might want to think like, how can I soundproof? That might not even cost you anything. You might just need to like put in, thicker curtains or, put in, it's good that you have like this couch type thing here and this bookshelf absorbing a lot of sound. So a lot of these things are you can kind of makeshift a good studio for yourself. So
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like a lot of people get wrapped up in, we need this, super fancy soundboard, or we need, you and I are working a little bit here and there on a podcast studio at work for a CCAD project, and we've both seen that listed. That's like a really, I don't remember the number, but it's an extensive
It's
list.
up there,
of, several grand. But for this, we're literally using an Insignia microphone that Evan purchased
At Best Buy for like $120.
Yeah, so that's a decent starting point for a mic. Insignia is not, Sennheiser, it's not Shure, it's not, whatever other name brand microphones are out there. We're recording on a Dell XPS laptop, and that's pretty much it. Our old process was really bumpy, and we would record on, like what we were saying before the show, 3 different microphones, 3 laptops, try to sync it all up, and it was a nightmare. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about your gear that you use for the First You Hustle? I'm sorry, let me re-say that because that sounded really country.
First You Hustle.
First You Hustle. The First You Hustle podcast. So talk to us a little bit about your gear. Like what's some of the stuff that you use and would recommend?
Yeah.
If somebody is listening and wants to get into that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, and actually that's a good segue into like do-it-yourself podcasting because I use my own equipment at CCAD. Through being in bands and stuff, you kind of acquire a lot of miscellaneous stuff. So I had a couple of microphones. They weren't the nicest microphones. They're like the low-end Shure microphones. They're like a Shure PGA 48. I think it's like a $30 or $40 microphone. So I have a couple of those. I had one of those blue Tascam 4-track recorders.
Really?
Those like plastic ones with the cassette tape in it. And I was using that as like a mixer. And I could mix the mics into it, and then I could line out into a computer. So I started there, and then I realized that hobbyists they still like those old school 4-track recorders. So I sold it, and with that money, I bought a better mixer, a digital mixer, and that's kind of all I needed for that. And then having done some video work, doing like freelance video work and things like that, I had a field recorder for video. Nice. And that kind of functions as like a portable recorder, so I can plug my mic straight into that. It runs on battery. I could go to anyone's office, and then their office is only a podcast studio. So it's like a couple $100s of equipment, and for me, most of that was acquired over many years of being in a band.
Yeah.
But even if you thought like, I'm just getting started, a couple $100s when you think about other hobbies you might do is not that much.
Mm-hmm. It's the same as like you said, golfing.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Pick up golf.
Yeah, you're gonna burn that in other stuff you do, so don't think of it as a barrier, but just little purchases like that can make it a lot better, because you buy one of those cheap $30 microphones, but you have a couple of them. That means like you can be closer to the mic, and if you have a quiet room and you're close to your source, you can tune that mic to get a really good sound.
Yeah.
When you're doing voice work, I mean, unless you're trying to do professional grade voiceovers and stuff, it doesn't take a lot to get a good sound.
Yeah.
So I want to circle back here real quickly. You talked about having a concept for your podcast. So at the very beginning, for someone who's just starting out on a podcast, is it more important for them to have a concept, like what they want to talk about, or the equipment that they're going to use?
I think a good concept will always trump bad, or lack of equipment. Okay. So a good concept on poor equipment, you'll still gather a little bit of an audience with that. People will still be curious to see what's going on. Yeah. Think about shaky cell cam footage that you've watched because it's really interesting. Of they didn't have the best camera, but something interesting was happening there. So even with bad quality capturing equipment, if the content is really great, then you're going to get an audience. So concept is all of it, because on the other end, you've probably tuned into a TV show or a podcast or listened to a band, and within 30 seconds you decide you're done because the concept isn't there, but they have professional grade equipment, they're in a professional sound studio, so none of that will work magic. It's kind of like a poor tool, a poor mechanic and always blames his tools. Where it's like if you're good at what you're doing, you'll make good with lower grade equipment. You'll make it work.
So you should take the time to invest, not just in the equipment, but in understanding how to use it.
Yeah, and the concept of what is it why do I want to connect to an audience? What is it that we're trying to say? What's our goal here? Yeah. And then that'll also keep you invested in wanting to make it better.
We'll probably get into it here in a little bit, but just having kind of a target audience.
Yeah.
Like yours is Columbus CCAD students. Mm-hmm. That's a mouthful.
Well, yeah, jumping into that, you kind of have a base topic of career advice for kids that are getting ready to enter the world. Mm-hmm. The guys will probably agree, we haven't really had a solid base. We've talked about a lot of different topics. Do you feel it's important to have a certain topic that you build upon?
Yeah, it's good to have what's your angle. And it doesn't need to be completely novel or purely original. If you want to do current affairs, each week we're gonna talk about what's been in the news. There's a lot of podcasts like that. But if you can find a way to do it in a fresh and dynamic way, then you're kind of bringing something new to a tried concept, which is perfectly fine. That's how most podcasts and TV shows and popular things gain popularity. It's this is a rehash of an old concept, but it's got a new spin on it. Or you can try to come up with something super novel and try an approach there, and that's always bound to maybe catch on, maybe not. But having some kind of angle of what is it that we're doing, why is it important that we're doing it and not someone else is doing it, and how is this not just a copy of something that's already out there? What's the new spin on it? Same way I talk with my students about when you're creating art, when you're creating design, you're going to gather inspiration from a lot of areas. Don't be very derivative of this is just a copy of what I saw, but like what's your new take on what you did with that inspiration?
When it goes into prep work for the podcast, do you do a lot of that? Do you have time set out throughout the week where you look up notes or whatever you're going to talk about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I try to forecast out the semester's worth of topics.
Okay.
So each week I know. So like I already know in March and April, like roughly what our topics are going to be. In fact, for March, I already have some of those recorded, so I just need to edit them. And when I first started, I had like 3 or 4 in the can before we even released the first one. I think I had 3 or 4 episodes completely done, which was nice because then I built myself. So 4 weeks doing every 2 weeks. I knew 8 weeks, half the semester, I already had all my content done, and then I had half of the semester to catch up and build the second half. So
does that give you a little bit of comfort?
Yeah, okay. it helps me think about the concepts in a better, kind of more rich way than like, I know I have something due on Wednesday and it's Monday and I gotta like scrape something together and just like turn on the light and hope something good comes out.
Right.
You try to avoid, doing that. And when I was in undergrad, I was a TV major and I worked on a weekly sports show.
Oh, cool.
And there would be some times where we would run into like, we don't know what's gonna be on the show and it's 2 days away and then you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel. And so having gone through how that half hour feels when you don't know what you're doing and you're trying to like squeeze out this a long half hour.
Well, sometimes you can get some gold nuggets from those, but I think most of the time they don't turn out to be very successful.
Yeah, there's some segments that were like, we had someone solve a Rubik's Cube once. It was like, we're just burning time. And
Oh,
like,
wow.
That's not a very good thing to do, but when you're on a deadline, you're forced to do it. You gotta do it. So I try to think ahead of the curve. And, with sports, that was, you're kind of pressed with like, I can't prep too far out because I don't know what the scores are going to be.
Right.
I don't know what's actually happening. But with careers, I already know what the topics are. They're evergreen topics. So I can already think about like, what do we have in our library now? What do we need in our library? And then start putting together episodes.
That's a good point. I like the way you said they're evergreen topics.
Yeah, they're not current events.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it, I feel like.
And also, First You Hustle is like kind of an indefinite anthology. Like it'll probably end at some point. At some point I'm going to recognize that like we've kind of done everything we can in the topic and we're going to walk away. Or we're going to turn it into something new, or we're going to kind of, revisit it.
Sure.
So not forcing like it needs to be an every day or an every week. Like, what's your timeline? Like, if you do every other week, you do monthly. I could see us moving if we start to run out of topics. We've kind of covered a lot, but we want to keep going. Maybe we move instead of every 2 weeks, it's every month. Maybe it's semesterly. Maybe it's kind of a one-off thing. There's some great podcast series out there that are just 10, episodes. Like we had one concept. It's a limited 10 series. It doesn't need to be something we're doing every day. Yeah. Those are great too.
The good thing about it is it's always out there. What you're doing now is always going to be there for people to listen down the road.
Yeah.
When it comes to promoting the show, do you have a certain pathway that you follow? Is there anything that you do? I know you have the radio, but social media or anything like that?
Yeah, so we'll post it on, we use Podbean, and Podbean kind of sends it out to iTunes and Google and Stitcher and Spotify and all the like marketplaces where you can get podcasts. So people have a place to subscribe. And then we have a Facebook page, so we'll post it there. I usually post it on LinkedIn since it's a career-focused podcast. It's like my social network of choice to post it on. So because of that, I don't post it on Twitter or any other social media accounts. But CCAD's marketing team, they'll bump it every now and again on their own channels, and that's nice when you're doing something with an institution that you kind of have their marketing with it. But without that, then I'd probably create its own Twitter handle or find some other ways to get it out there, because that's super important to always be getting the word out.
So to feed off of that, I think you had mentioned to me one time. I remember you and I were having a conversation. There was some kind of event that was happening at the auditorium, and you and I were having a conversation before the event started. And this is something I looked into, but I don't know if our podcast here. I don't know if we've nailed that or if we've missed this or if it's too late to try to jump on board here, but. You'd mentioned in that conversation, I was saying, hey Jordan, I'd love to pick your brain and get some ideas about how to do a podcast because these guys were thinking about doing one, and we jumped into a conversation, and one of the things you said was, that there's a window. I think you said there's like a window of time where as you're building your episodes, getting your topics together, doing the recording. There's like a window of time where promotion is super crucial in order to try to gain some traction.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you remember that, but all that to say, as you release like your first episode, your second episode, and so on and so forth, is there a method to the madness, or is it just like throw it out there and then have your friends and family like it or what have you, and then hope for the best?
Yeah, I think I remember I was specifically talking about in iTunes you have like they give you like a 5 or 6 week window of like if it's new and noteworthy and it's starting to get a lot of plays or subscriptions, then it'll be featured on the new and noteworthy. It'll like be higher up in the search listing, so you can really gather an audience just through happenstance of people open up the app and they want to browse, based on you liking this, you might like this, like it'll show up in that suggestion. If in your first few episodes, you're getting a lot of action right away. And usually people have it's the other case. They're posting and they're trying to build their audience, so the first few episodes only have a few listens, and then you don't quite make that. So if you plan it properly, you can get into iTunes, have a few episodes kind of done in the can, so you can release, some people are just releasing like 2 or 3 episodes at the very beginning, like at once, so people have a few episodes they can go through, and then really kind of making sure you have a good marketing campaign, which might be like telling your friends and family, like, hey, everyone go in, like it, play it, subscribe it, try to game the system a little bit, but that little catalyst can help you build an audience because people just find it. The very first podcast I did in college, podcasting was still fairly new. I think it was like 2007. It wasn't really quite catching on, but we weren't doing anything super special, but we were like featured in the new and noteworthy college section because it was a college topic. And when we started creating, we told our friends, and everyone kind of listened to the first episode and never really realized how we got into that algorithm. But then when I was talking with someone, they had mentioned that, like, oh, that's how they choose new and noteworthy. And it all makes sense. I probably could have figured it out on my own, but like you upload something and it's starting to get a lot of clicks, then Apple's going to say like, oh, that must be a hot topic, featured on the front page.
Sure. I think that with that being said, I'm sorry, Evan has a little bit of an allergy problem. But with that being said, I think it makes sense. Obviously, if there's something that's popular, I mean, it's just like the news. Like something crazy political happens, and it's instant. It's just like right there on the news, right in front of your face, and you're not gonna miss it. So, we kind of did that with our show here. Where I think we recorded 5. We set a goal.
We had 5 in the bank.
Yeah, Mike set a goal of 5, and we just stuck to it. We had 5 that we released over the course of November. And then as November started to unfold, we would just kind of get together on a weekly or bi-weekly basis and just record, and then I would edit, and then all 3 of us would promote on Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff. So one of the questions I wanted to ask was when it comes to social media is how, and we're getting close on time, but it's just how when you're making a post, is there any kind of language or verbiage that you should or shouldn't use whenever you're, I know that probably sounds like you don't want to say anything stupid, obviously, but like what would you say to that? Like, is there a special format, if you will, of language that you should use?
Well, you're a content creator, so you gotta think like a content producer, and I see a lot of people that have their kind of hobby podcast, and then they release it as like, hey, I have a new episode.
Sorry.
If your post is just like, hey, I have a new episode, here's the link, no one's gonna click that. But if you're thinking about like what was happening in our episode, what's the sort of headline for that, and then try to think of a way to make it interesting, then you're bound to get more people that are curious and going to click on it. But yeah, I see a lot of like, you can post and then it'll auto kind of feed your, if you post up like on like Podbean or another kind of podcast library, it might be like, do you want to cross post this to Twitter and Facebook? You click yes, and it's auto generated messages, just like
very bland.
Yeah, hey, listen to this. I just posted something. It's like, yeah, well, no one's gonna click that. So try to use hashtags and try to upload a unique image to each podcast, and the same things that would make you click it if it were a news article or some other video or something. Like there's got to be some kind of catch to get you in.
Do you ever try to use like anything like a puns or anything like that?
Yeah, try to think of like catchy titles. Puns are always fun. I don't think anyone's ever going to get too angry at a pun.
We did a podcast a few weeks ago about the failed Fire Festival.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you saw that Netflix documentary.
No, I haven't seen either of them, but they're on my list.
That's crazy.
We talked about that because it was like kind of like a fresh like hot topic, so we tried to capitalize on it per se. And so we used like I think play on words with like fire there when we were able to.
Yeah.
Well, and with that, before we close out here, if you had to name this episode, I'm putting you on the spot. If you had to name episode 15, what would you name episode 15?
You would name it First You Hustle.
I would call it. Make sure you subscribe to First You Hustle. I'm not sure.
All right, well, think on it. And when we go on Facebook Live here in a little bit.
All right, I'll have some.
Well, here's another question for you. Just from being with us for the past 30 minutes, what would be some general advice you would have for us right now as a podcast? So what is something that we can do
Be brutally
to better
honest.
ourselves?
Well, there's two sides of it. There's the technical side, so you could obviously always upgrade your equipment. You have one mic going into a computer through USB. The problem is you get two mics and you need something to mix them together, and it kind of cascades from there. So if you go the technical route, it'd probably be at least one more microphone, maybe some like soundproofing in here. Things like that. Audacity is a free music editing software, so like
we had been using that.
You can edit and mix in other tracks. So even if you were each recording on your own laptop, like you were doing before, Audacity makes it a little bit easy to kind of match it up, things like that. And then as far as content goes, it's just sort of working out the kinks of like what's our personalities and what sort of take are we going to have on topics, or how are we going to talk through things, like what's our shtick going to be. And that sometimes takes a while to figure out. It takes a few episodes before you really get into your groove. Even on First You Hustle, I've kind of explored different ways of like, maybe I'll approach it from being a storyteller, maybe I'll approach it from being an expert, maybe I'll approach it more from like, I don't know if you remember Loveline with Dr. Drew, like on TV growing up.
I do know Dr. Drew though.
Okay, so like Loveline used to be like a love advice call-in show, and it was really popular on MTV in the 90s. When I was thinking about careers, I'm like, careers are a lot like relationships, so maybe we could try to do something where like we're answering questions and people are calling us for their problems, or they're writing in and things like that. So I've explored a few different formats to see what works, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You kind of test it, and then you make adjustments from there. And as long as you're not taking your audience on too wild of a ride, then they'll stay with you. So don't like flip the book on them every time, but you can like try something new and see how it goes, and then A/B test it kind of.
Yeah.
So we can end with this, and you can promote your show afterwards. But I am curious. I'm sure you talk about it a lot on First You Hustle. What is a message that you give to a young person getting ready to start their post-college career?
Yeah, I try to remind college students, like, you're young, and people are gonna see that you're young. They're gonna see that you're new, and just kind of ride with that. Like, it's okay to be green and to be curious and ask questions and to investigate things, and you don't need to leave thinking, I already belong in the inner circle, I'm going to kind of pretend I already belong in the inner circle, and that kind of fake it till you make it. A lot of times that means you're shutting yourself out from opportunities, because you're at a networking event or you meet someone and you don't ask them questions about their job, or you don't ask them things that you're curious about learning. Continue being a sponge and being a student even after you graduate. And then by doing that, you'll kind of gravitate towards the right people. They'll see that you're curious and you're hungry, and they're more willing to give you a shot. So the kind of broad advice, which is hard to give broad advice because everyone has a different career path for every industry, it's going to be a little different. But I think for the most part, across every single industry, people are just interested in hiring, who's curious, who wants to show up and work hard. And those are the people that are asking questions that, you guys are clearly passionate about podcasting because you ask a lot of questions about podcasting. You asked me about equipment you should do, how do you build an audience? Those are, if I were looking to hire someone and a young person came to me and was, asking questions like that, I'm like, this person's really been thinking about this. This is what they live and breathe. So obviously I'm going to hire that person. But college students are afraid to do that because they don't want to be seen as, not ready or at the beginner phase. But you're young, you're a college student. They already see you that way. They see a kid. You think when you're graduating college, you think you're an adult. But now being 10 years out of college, it's like, you guys are kids, you know, like I'm not, and that's not a put down. I'm not that much older than today's college students, but it's like it really makes me think like, yeah, I was still a kid. I was still very green. I should have taken advantage of being that curious doe idea that someone wanted to, you know, take under their wing and mentor, and you know, could have kind of used that to my advantage a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I try to remind students that like don't try to grow up too fast.
Yeah,
it's great
That's
advice.
Awesome. That's so much better than the traditional, like, you know, like you said, don't grow up so fast. Don't wish your life away.
Mm-hmm.
I like your version of that a lot better. So, well, hey, why don't you tell everybody where in the world can we listen to First You Hustle, and how can we listen? How can we support? You know, all that fun stuff.
So you can listen pretty much anywhere you find podcasts. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher. We're on Facebook.com/FirstYouHustle. We're on Spotify, and all the kids are on Spotify these days.
Yeah.
So you should try to get your podcast on Spotify.
That's a tough one to get onto.
Yeah, they're actually kind of opening the doors a little bit wider. It used to be that they would hand select, but now you can kind of pitch your idea to
We
them.
ran into an issue with that.
Yeah?
I'm calling this person out. Dadgummit. There's another Third Floor podcast, but we're on Google Play, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, iTunes, yeah, that one. We're on Twitcher. We're on Stitcher. We're on several different. I think we're on Podbean too. We use SoundCloud as our main host.
Yep.
I did look at Podbean, and we may switch on that. I do like the way their format is. But
what he's trying to say is we've
there's-
done very well at getting the Third Floor pod out everywhere.
Yeah.
And
making it
this
kind of
other
our own
guy out there is like hogging Spotify. Spotify won't let us on because
Yeah.
of the name. So
he cock blocked us.
That's
that
it.
happens. It's business, right?
Yeah. But you know, like, I mean, Spotify, they're trying to make a play into the podcasting game, but it's not the one destination. Like, being on Apple and Google Play, I think, are the two big ones, because most people, they're using their device when they listen. So.
yeah, we just got on Google Play. So we can find First You Hustle on all those platforms.
That's right. And for support, write your check to CCAD.
There you go.
There you go.
To keep the lights on. Maybe out to Todd Church or Jordan Hill.
Yeah, one of us will pick it up.
Good shout out.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
a solid.
Well, why don't you do the honors and close us out here, and come up with some kind of really cool podcast statement. Ready, go.
Thanks for listening.
There you
Good
go.
for me.
All right. Well, it's been real. It's been fun. This has been special guest Jordan Bell, friend of mine, coworker of mine, and now a friend of the Third Floor podcast. We'll have to have him back sometime. We gave him a milkshake, so maybe that'll
I owe
entice
you
him.
now, yeah.
Maybe that'll entice him to come back. So until next time, we'll catch you later. So Mike, why don't you do the honors of stopping that video?